In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at some NHL trade scenarios that we might see this coming offseason. We're referencing a Sportsnet article where they reference all 31 NHL teams' most likely asset to be traded when we hit the NHL offseason. Today, we're taking a look at Detroit, Ottawa, and the Minnesota Wild. We'll get into all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, today we're taking a look at a Sportsnet article. It was published a few days ago. I had a chance to read through this article, and there was a lot of very interesting scenarios presented in this that I wanted to discuss. Now, of course, there's 31 different trade scenarios presented in this very lengthy, in-depth article, so we're not going to get into all 31 scenarios today. That would be way too long and way too much for one video, but I wanted to take a look at some of the pieces that I felt were some of the most interesting talking points for today, and then we're going to possibly look at some other ones here in the days to come as we get through all of these eventually. But there's certainly some interesting points of view in this article that I want to share with you to see what you think on some of these trades we might see this offseason. Now, of course, as I mentioned, a couple of ones we're looking at include the Red Wings, the Senators, and the Wild. And of course, you probably can tell by the thumbnail which players they suggested could be the most likely tradable assets. Let's start with the Detroit Red Wings, where they selected forward Anthony Mantha. Now, of course, Anthony Mantha is a pending restricted free agent, currently making $3.3 million. It's certainly a lot of debate on whether or not he stays or goes. There's been a lot of rumors around this player over the last number of weeks since we've had the NHL pause. There's a lot of talk whether or not he could be a potential offer sheet candidate this offseason. There's a lot of talk whether or not he re-signs a long-term deal in Detroit and becomes a big part of their rebuild. Or there's also a lot of talk that he could possibly be moved along, and maybe Detroit would be better off to trade him rather than commit a lot of money and a lot of term to this player, as they're still quite a ways off from really being a really competitive playoff team. They got a lot of pieces that they're missing on that roster that they need to continue to work on here over the next number of years. We do know they're going to likely be adding a big piece to that when we finally have the 2020 NHL draft. Of course, we don't know exactly where they're going to be selecting, but they will be selecting anywhere between the top four for sure, regardless of what format of the draft lottery the NHL decides to go with here. Now, let's take a look at the excerpt from the article discussing the thoughts around a potential Mantha trade. The Mantha piece starts off by saying, "We'll say that it's probably not likely Mantha gets moved. After all, he is in his prime. He'll be 26 next season, and Detroit still needs players to score if they are going to emerge out of this rebuild anytime soon. But Mantha could also bring a haul of futures back to the Red Wings if they decide to do that rather than re-sign him to a big money contract this offseason. He's still an RFA, but the Wings will likely be buying up some UFA years as well, which would bring up the price. It will be complicated, I think," Mantha said to Detroit News recently. "It's not that it's in my power. My power is to play hockey. My agent and Stevie are going to talk. Maybe they've started. I don't even know. It's hard to base right now. I played like 40 games this year. I missed many games, so it's hard to go for the extension before the end of the year. We'll see in the offseason." Now, of course, Anthony Mantha did have an injury-riddled season. That very well could have an impact on his potential contract for next year, and whether or not he gets to play again and finish out the 1920 season very well could have an impact as well. Now, of course, Anthony Mantha has put up some pretty good numbers with the Red Wings since he's become a regular player in their lineup. Of course, he was originally their 2013 first-round selection, made the team at a camp a few years later. His first full season, he scored 17 goals, then he followed that up with a 24-goal campaign, and then he topped that again with 25, but he also missed games that year, only played in 67 games, so clearly he was on pace for 30-plus goals that season before being hurt. And then, of course, this past year, he certainly slowed down again due to injuries, though overall his production wasn't too bad, where he ended up scoring 16 goals in 43 games. So, in a full season, he would have been close to a 30-goal guy as well. And, of course, he's a big guy, 6'5", 234 pounds, can play a power forward type of game, and is certainly a kind of player that doesn't come along every day. So trading away a player like this very well could bring a decent return. Like I said, there is an argument to be made that maybe trading him rather than committing a lot of money in term might be the better way to go. I mean, like I said, they're a long ways off from being a competitive regular playoff team. They already have some other bad contracts on the team with some money tied up in guys like Abdelkader and Nielsen and Darren Helm and others. So clearly they don't want to have another potential contract who could end up like that in a longer term type of situation. They have other guys that are going to be around, be part of the solution, like Dylan Larkin, who's got a fair bit of term on his deal. Looks like they're going to sign Tyler Bertuzzi to a pretty good contract this summer. He's also an RFA and certainly a part of their core moving forward. They have some other younger players they can help build around. On the blue line, they've got Hronik and Sider up front. Zadina, Velino appear to be, potential big pieces here, plus whatever they add at the NHL draft this summer. If they were to be lucky enough to add Lafreniere or even a guy like Byfield or Stutzler, or any of those guys could become big parts along with the other guys I've already mentioned. And like I said, Mantha's a proven goal scorer, but at the same time, how much better are they with or without him? It's debatable. I can really see a decent scenario here where he could be traded, and I do see a lot of reason to keep him around as well. It's certainly hard to say because of Detroit's predicament and where they're at in the standings and whether or not he's really, a big part of the team solution or not. So let me know what your thoughts are. Should the Red Wings trade Anthony Mantha, bring back what they can for some more futures and continue this rebuild? Or is he young enough and a strong enough scorer that he very well could be a big part of the solution in the next few years as they start to come out of the rebuild on the other side of this with all these young guys feeling their potential and moving this team forward? Now, next up, I want to take a look at the Minnesota Wild defenseman Matt Dumba, another player who battled a lot of injuries this year, but there was a lot of talk around the Minnesota Wild making a big trade before the NHL trade deadline. Of course, as the second half of the season carried on and we get closer to the deadline, the Minnesota Wild also started playing some better hockey. We saw a coaching change, and they did play much better afterwards as well. But clearly, in my opinion, this Wild team, even though they were playing better hockey before the NHL pause and they had a good stretch there, I just don't see how that can be sustained long term, and I don't think GM Bill Guerin should really take a lot of hope within that stretch of games, because I really think overall they need to go through a bit of a rebuild or a retool before they can really move this team forward. They've needed it for some time. So let's take a look at the snippet here from the article on the Dumba situation and why they thought he might be the most likely one to be traded. The article states it's Dumba or Brodin. Both were part of the trade deadline rumors, but it was always more likely one would get moved in the offseason instead, when teams can go over the cap and have generally more room to maneuver. The thing is, the Wild were playing good hockey before the pause, so will that give GM Bill Guerin a reason to keep the squad together? The Wild have been spinning their wheels for a while, so it would seem some change is necessary. And I couldn't agree more with that snippet on the article there, because clearly, like I said, Minnesota's a team who hasn't really been moving forward in some time. I think there's an argument to keep Dumba around, obviously, because of where they're at. Obviously, he plays a good role for them, but at the same time, they desperately need some help up front. There's a lot of talk about longtime forward Zach Parise possibly being traded. He was really close to being moved at the deadline, and I do see that as being a strong possibility of being revisited during the offseason, so he could be moved. They have Mikko Koivu likely retiring, so there's a couple of contracts likely coming off the books this year, but they might be getting another potential big contract back in a Parise trade. Hard to say exactly, but there's a lot of talk that either a guy like Brodin or Dumba on the blue line would be traded to help bring back a top 6-4, preferably a number 1 or number 2 center iceman. And between the two defensemen, I just see Dumba having a little bit more value. He's got 3 more years at $6 million, a little bit more offensively gifted. Not that Brodin's a slouch at all. He's a really solid top 4 defenseman too, can play some decent minutes, play some stronger defense likely than Dumba, but it seems like offense tends to get more money, a little bit more attention and better trade value, and a guy like Dumba is going to bring that for you more so than Brodin, though. So as I mentioned, Dumba is 25 years old. He's a right shot, which is very attractive. He's proven to be, a pretty solid 50, 60 point defenseman in the past. Can play in the power play, and it's just not really clear what else they could move in order to help bring back a top young forward to really help move the offense along there. It's a team who needs to get some more goals on their forward group. Obviously, a guy like Ryan Suter and Jared Spurgeon aren't going anywhere. They're a little bit older, into their 30s now, and they have longer-term contracts. So it's one of these other top young defensemen like Dumba or Brodin that's likely going to make that happen. If they trade Parise and Koivu retires, that hopefully will generate a little bit more flexibility for them up front. They do have some younger pieces that were certainly playing well this past year, like Kevin Fiala. If they can bring another top center iceman into play with him, then that would certainly help go a long ways as well. And if they are fortunate enough, depending on where they land in the 2020 draft, they might be able to get another pretty good piece there as well. Hopefully, we'll also be signing Russian forward Kirill Kaprizov, who's supposed to be coming to the NHL this coming year. I believe one of the issues right now, he doesn't have an agent in North America, which is delayed the signing with the Wild. Otherwise, that will likely be announced sometime here in the near future, but he should be an offensive punch for them added as well. But they desperately need help at the center ice position, and trading one of their top young D might be the best way to go about doing that. And lastly here, I want to take a look at the Ottawa Senators forward Anthony Duclair. Now, of course, he was acquired last year at the NHL trade deadline in the Ryan Dzingel trade. They got Duclair along with a pair of second-round selections, and right now this deal looks like it's worked out pretty nicely for Ottawa compared to Columbus. Dzingel did not play all that well during his short stretch of time with the Blue Jackets and then left via free agency, whereas Duclair ended up finishing with 23 goals last year and 40 points, put up a career year, and said plus they have the 2 draft picks, which they will be selecting between this year and next year's NHL draft. Now, except Duclair is an RFA, he's 23 years old, he's bounced around a bit, but seemed to find a good fit, a good home with Ottawa. Let's take a look at the article to see their rationale for possibly trading Duclair. The article says, you have to wonder what Duclair really is as an NHL player after this season. On one hand, he scored 23 goals in 66 games, up from 19 and 11 in the past 2 years. On the other hand, he scored only 2 of those goals after January the 1st. Duclair is up for salary arbitration where he'll get a raise, but you have to wonder if this is a sell-high opportunity for Ottawa, just as a number of young forwards on their AHL team could make a push for the NHL roster. That point right there is exactly a great reason why you really should consider trading Duclair if you're the Senators. He put up a career year, and obviously he showed in stretches that he really struggled and really went a long stretch there without scoring at all. Only got 2 goals in the second half of the year. On the first half of the year, he was on fire, and like I said, he's probably going to be looking for a longer-term deal with a little bit more stability, bigger term, bigger money, and nearly they could possibly bring back some other future assets to really help along with this rebuild rather than pay and commit a lot of term and money to Anthony Duclair. They've got a lot of great prospects right now in their system, many of which are going to be battling for spots. We saw guys like Drake Batherson and Logan Brown have up and down years, but certainly performed quite well at the AHL. I think they deserve a longer look at the NHL opportunity. Of course, you got a guy like Alex Formenton who had a terrific AHL rookie season. Josh Norris really tore it up down in the American Hockey League as well. They all had some opportunities in the NHL, and they've got more coming. They've got 2 high picks in the draft. They have a lot of young forwards that are going to be battling for spots here. I do know you do need to have some veterans around, some guys who can be a little bit older, more experienced, and some guys that are a little bit more proven, and Duclair could do that. So I do think there's a possibility you keep Duclair and sign him, but it's really all going to boil down to money. I don't think that they should really commit too much and too long to him. Yes, he had a career year for them, but it's a situation where he needs to continue to prove himself on a more consistent basis before he gets a longer-term deal with the bigger dollars attached. To me, I'd only go maybe a 2-year deal at most, probably somewhere around $3.5 million range. Yes, he hit 23 goals last year, was a big player for your team, but before that, he's bounced around with numerous organizations, terribly inconsistent, and he needs to continue to prove that before he gets longer term. If he won't commit to that kind of contract, then I'm seriously going to push him on the trade market and see what else I can bring back to help continue this rebuild along. I've already got 2 second-round picks that I haven't used yet from this trade as well. Dzingel's long gone, and so far I've won this deal, and I'm quite happy here. And whenever I get back on a Duclair trade, just adds that much more to it. So that's my thoughts on Duclair. But of course, as all these guys, I want to know what your thoughts are. Should guys like Anthony Mantha, Matt Dumba, or Anthony Duclair be high up on the trade market this summer? Or should they be considered to be long-term solutions to their existing teams in helping move them forward out of their current situations? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll continue the conversation. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Thank you again to all of our channel membership holders. Your support for the channel is greatly appreciated. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.